Jai Shri Radhe. Today is day 48 of the readings of the 252 Vaishnavas, disciples of Sri Gosaiji. And we are on Varta 26, the story of Haridas Baniya. Continuing from yesterday. A little later, the king's sister addressed him. See, Jamelji, my brother, you have offended a Vaishnava. As a result of this, Sri Gosaiji would not even come over your village borders. Others pass through the village. Look, he is flying far away. He is on his way to Dwarka. Jamalji replied to his sister, if you say so, I shall follow Sri Gosaiji on my chariot and request him to turn back. She said, this request cannot be given forcefully. It requires humility. When Sri Gosaiji is on his way back from Dwarkaji, then you can very humbly try to bring him here. The king agreed. When he is on his return journey, I shall request him to come to our town. Jamalji established a postal service between Dwarka and Merta, so that he would know where Sri Gosaji's camp was being set up, and he told his men to inform him of this. They kept him up to date on Sri Gosaji's whereabouts. He knew exactly where he was staying. When the king knew that Sri Gosaiji was approaching his village, he sent a man to go to call Haridas. Haridas came and stood in the king's court. Jamalji took his hand and led him to a private place where he pleaded, today Sri Gosaiji camp is in so-and-so village. Therefore, would you please start out tomorrow, and the next day meet the Lord and ask him to set up camp in our village. But will you please also forgive me my offence and be merciful to me, and then I can come with you and have Sri Gosaji's sight. With your blessings, my life can be fulfilled in this way. You are a Vaishnava, and so I know you will be beneficent to me like this. In this way, Jamalji severally pleaded with Haridas. Haridas, seeing the king's pure sentiment, was pleased and said, okay. The next day, the king and Haridas left the village together. When they knew that Sri Gosaiji was very close by, they went and stood on the road he had first travelled. Sri Gosaiji caught sight of Jamalji's army. He asked someone where the army had come from, and, on being told that the army belonged to Jamalji from Merta, directed his chariot to another road. Then Jamalji, taking Haridas with him, ran in front of Sri Gosaiji's chariot and fell on the ground. The charioteer made him stand up. Haridas bowed down to Sri Gosaiji and pleaded in many ways. O Maharaj, King Jamal has come here to accompany you to his village and is asking if he might bow down to you. Sri Gosaiji gave his permission, and Haridas took the king to humbly prostrate to Sri Gosaiji. Having done so, Jamalji requested Sri Gosaiji, Haridas is most fortunate to have been accepted into your shelter. He calls you his lord and the lord of Gokul. I am an ignorant fool. I treated him in a very foolish way. However, an embodied soul who has you to bless and advise them can never go wrong. Therefore, O Maharaj, please let me take shelter in you right now. Please do with me as you will. However, my request is that you initiate me with the Lord's name first and then accompany back to my village. Please grace me in this way. He supplicated Sri Gosaiji severally in this manner. Seeing the purity of his sentiment, Sri Gosaiji told him to bathe then and there, and he initiated him with the Lord's name. Sri Gosaiji then turned his chariot round, entered Jamelji's village, and set up camp at Haridas's house. Jamel walked behind the chariot from that place where he had been initiated. After making sure that Sri Gosaiji was nicely settled in at Haridas's place, the king returned home. Then King Jamel ordered every single resident in his village to be initiated by Sri Gosaiji, saying, if they did not do so, they would not be able to live in the village. They were all initiated by Sri Gosaiji, as were all the king's family members. Then the king invited Sri Gosaiji to stay in his own home. Sri Gosaiji established the Seva of Sri Thakurji in the king's home. He gave him a Sri Thakurji whom he bathed in the 5 nectars. He then cooked, made the offerings to Sri Thakurji, accepted back the offerings as prasad at the right time, settled Sri Thakurji to his afternoon rest, partook of prasad and went to rest. Afterwards, the king requested Sri Gosaiji to recount to him all the ways of Seva, and Sri Gosaiji did just that. Jamel thus extended his hospitality to Sri Gosaiji for many more days. Sri Gosaiji then decided to go back to Gokul. He instructed the king, if you need to ask anything, please ask Haridas. The king was most joyous. He bowed to Sri Gosaiji, made many generous donations to him, and took his leave before he went off back to Gokul. On his way back, though, Sri Gosaiji spent one day with Haridas at his home. When he set off, the whole of the village went along with him. Sri Gosaiji, after some time, told them all to go back to their homes whilst he continued on to Gokul. This story demonstrates, Bhav Prakash, how strong an influence one single Vaishnava can have. From this, Sri Gosaiji became well known all over the world. The presence of even one lone Vaishnava in a village means that sooner or later the whole area will be uplifted. Of this there is no doubt. Part 1 continued. This news that King Jaimal and all his villagers had become Sri Gosaiji's disciples, Nagji Bhatt, who lived in Godhra, he travelled from Godhra to Merta and took a job as a servant of King Jaimal. Nagji eventually became a manager in the king's employ and was sent by the king to meet the emperor as his representative. Nagaji fulfilled the king's orders and then came to Sri Gosaiji in Gokul and made many donations to him. He stayed there close to Sri Gosaiji for a few days and then came to Merta. Sri Gosaiji gave Nagji a good send-off. Nagji came to Merta and presented King Jaimal with the emperor's warrant. Jaimal was very pleased with Nagji, whom, after some time, he appointed as his family minister. It was thus that the king became a Vaishnava through his sister's advice alone. Part 2. Haridas had a daughter who had grown up and was of marriageable age. Haridas was perturbed that he knew of no suitable Vaishnava boy for her. He began to think over the subject a lot, but he could not find the proper boy. One day Haridas called his family priest to him and gave him his daughter and money for the wedding and said, "Please find a suitable home and husband for this girl. Look around even if you have to go far from here. But please marry her off before you return." The priest went to look for a groom. On the road to Dwarka he managed to get the girl engaged to one boy, and so he came to fetch her and had her married off to him. The priest then came back to Haridas and told him everything, that he had found a suitable boy for her in a certain village and had performed a very nice marriage for her. Hearing the priest's tale, Haridas kept quiet and then sent him off after rewarding him as best he could. Thus Haridas was a recipient of Sri Gosaiji's grace and an accomplished Vaishnava. He made all the village and even its king become Vaishnavas. From that day onwards the king would ask from Haridas anything that he wanted to know, and before doing anything, King Jaimal was very respectful of Haridas and was not careful to offend him. Thus concludes Varta 26, the story of Haridas, although really there is no end to his tale. So we conclude here for today. Jai Jai Shri Radhe, Aaj ke Anand ki Jai Ho Ji. Jai Jai Shri Radhe. We continue tomorrow.